Okay.
Okay.
Now, Ron, you should be able to hear me.
me.
And I get to hear a delightful echo. All right. So how about this? Let's start over.
I was going to say, so I'm the silly guy who can't read the chat, but you can just let me know how to do that later. Just let me know if anybody addresses me because I'm not reading.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do. So anyway, this is the first practice episode of the One Up Reject show. I'm Blaine. I've got with me Anthony and Ernesto. We'll do better introductions in just a moment. This is a practice episode. This is more or less intended to be a total disaster. I am echoing so badly in my own ears right now. It's making me fucking crazy.
Accomplishing that.
So what?
So far, we're accomplishing that goal.
Yeah. Am I echoing to you guys?
No,
you're fine on this end.
Okay. So at least that. God, there's got to be a way to mute myself to myself. Whatever. Okay.
So what you're saying is you can't get rid of the voices inside your head.
Yeah.
Start.
But so yeah. Couple things real quick. We are the One Up Rejects. We're remnants of the old One Up community, like oneup.com. If anyone's from that community and wants to get with us, like not sexually, we're totally down. Just hit us up in the chat. oneuprejects.blogspot.com. We will register a real domain somewhere down the road. The focus of the show for the moment is what you're playing, and then maybe some current events, but I really want to try and keep it focused on gaming. There's a podcast I used to really enjoy, and it seems like they spend 20 to 30 minutes at the front of the show on fucking food, and I have to skip past it. So we're going to try to keep it focused on gaming and things that relate to gaming. But anyway, So I'm Blaine. I'm one of the rejects, and this is our show. We decided to try to get this going. I'm just babbling right now because the echo's making me crazy. So I'm going to stop talking for a bit, let these other guys introduce themselves. So, Ernesto, why don't you go?
My name is Ernesto, but you already said my name, so it's all good.
So who are you?
I'm also a remnant from the One Up community, and we actually, when that closed, we try to find a home somewhere else, and that's where the Facebook group comes in. Me, Ron, and a couple other people set that up, and then we've been basically at that for 10 years now, maybe more.
God, it's been that long.
I think so, yeah.
Jeez. So what about you, Mr. Anthony?
Not a whole lot to say. I mean, hell, I was part of One Up Yours. There's the only other thing as far as a media perspective was the old podcast that we used to do, which used to have, like 80 downloads, 80 downloads a week. So in general, though, from a gaming perspective, and I think that we're all born in the late 70s, early 80s. So it really grew up primarily in the 16-bit era. At least speaking for myself, onward to that. So a little bit of an older perspective, but definitely, I think that it's aged well, like a good wine.
There you go.
So yeah, as far as current, I have all the current systems, prefer PC, but will dabble in almost anything else. I think that both of you are the same way, but I figured that would be good to get out there.
Actually Ernesto is mostly representing the less elitist crowd.
Which one is that?
The PS4 plebeian, less snobby.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And then go ahead.
Predominantly Nintendo and PlayStation, basically.
I was going to say, if you just came on here repping the Wii U, I think that's It's the only non-mainstream one at this point.
And actually, I can't. This is a little tangential, but I can't wait to see. God, I can't fucking deal with the echo. I'm really curious to see where the Switch is in a year, because I was looking at some of the sales figures for this year, and it is selling as well right now as the Wii U was at the same point in the holiday, even though the Wii U launched in the holiday. So even though the Switch has already sold, like 70 bajillion units, it's still selling like fucking hotcakes. What, 7 months later?
Yeah, but so that's one of the things that's sort of been bugging me, because I do have a Switch, but it still doesn't feel different. So go back to the Wii, right? The Wii was an enormous success from a sales perspective, but I never felt that from a gaming perspective, just because nothing that came out felt to me like it was as impactful as things on the other systems at the time. I preferred 360 PS3 to the Wii, hands down. And true, some of that was due to the graphical differentiation, but some of it was due to just Nintendo mishandles everything that they can. And I say that having bought a Switch. Hell, I bought the SNES Mini that just came out as well. I love their games, but just look at the way that they're handling SNES Mini and Switch. Like, the biggest thing the Switch has going for it is handheld, but there's no virtual console. There's no pathway to it. And while they brought out a Zelda and a Mario this year, traditionally, look at like a 5-year block of time. How many Marios do we get? How many Zeldas do we get? It's been an amazing first year to get both of those. But how does that bode for like the next 2 years? Because we know they aren't getting much from anybody else. Yeah, it's cool to play Doom on the go, but do we care? I'm not going to replay it. And that's just a personal opinion, but if this is your only system, it's cool, but almost everybody that I would think is getting a Switch probably has something else, either a PS4, an Xbox One, or a gaming-capable PC. I don't see this as this is my only next-gen system.
All right, Ernesto.
Well, what I've seen is, now I hear an echo on my end. Interesting. What I see is that like the Switch crowd has, for the most part, been really loyal, and they'll buy anything, because even games like that were not expected to sell, they've been selling a lot. Like the best example of that is the Street Fighter 2 Hyper or something, whatever. That sold a hell of a lot, and even Capcom was surprised. Like, oh shoot, so we better start making games for this console. So, and even games like indie games like, for example, Oceanhorn, they did not expect that to sell as much on the Nintendo console, because Oceanhorn is basically a clone of Zelda. And they're basically making a clone of Zelda, and the main console for that is Nintendo. And it sold better on Switch than it did on all other consoles combined, like PC, PS4, everything else. So
how much is that though? I just bought a $300 system. I like that it's on the go, and I want something other than the two main Nintendo games to play. I mean, we obviously don't have gameplay statistics, but I wonder how much of that is just, I just want to have something to play on this because it's a cool system concept. But in reality, a ton of people will drop $15 on something, $20, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't mean that they're playing it for 20 hours. I wonder how many people got it, booted it up, played it for 15 minutes, and then never touched it again. That's where I get the sales figures. It happens with almost any system. Hell, look at the N64, launched with just Mario 64 and Pilot Wings. That pushed Pilot Wings to be like a million seller, and it was quite honestly not very good.
Though Mario 64 was the greatest game from Mario game ever. So just I just want to get that out there.
Mario World's still better.
Fuck Mario World.
Whoa!
How was that, Ron?
I don't appreciate that, Blaine. That's my favorite Mario. No, but it's interesting to see. Like, I would also like to see what that data looks like with the sales figures and the play time. But I don't know. Does Nintendo care how long they play a game as long as they buy it?
But it does speak to, is this going to be sustained, or is it just, I got the system, I got Mario, I got Zelda, and I'm going to get a handful of other things to try it out because the delivery method is novel, and then it goes the way of the Wii or even the Wii U as far as actual usage. I mean, the Wii U I don't consider a bad system, but it just has those 5 games over 5 years. They're 5 amazing games, and to me, that's worth owning it. I don't regret owning it, but it's nothing compared to the other systems that are out. And that's where I consider it a shame, because this delivery method. I mean, the other thing that bugs me, they aren't going to converge the handheld and the console market. I hate playing stuff on my 3DS. I mean, that's mainly just because my hand cramps. I mean, I'm thinking that when I'm playing Metroid right now, it's a pain for me to play it. I would love to be playing that on the Switch, but because they refuse to converge those markets, it's probably not going to happen.
I'm going to do a mic check real quick and see if I'm still echoing badly for Ron. Am I echoing for you guys?
No, you're fine.
You're fine.
Okay. Also, I just want to point out that your hands are huge from masturbating so much.
Okay.
No, that's why he gets cramps in his hands.
Oh, okay.
I guess you had to be there, but you're lucky.
Yeah. Well, like, wow, you have insider information there.
Well, masturbation is a spectator sport.
Sure. But well, I'll tell you what. Can I derail the Nintendo FAP session?
You just did with the masturbation comment.
Well, it's more that I diverted the masturbation.
Okay. All right. No, go ahead, my friend.
So, but actually, this is perfect because this is exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to randomly spawn. You know, you get passionate gamer one-up people in a room, so to speak, and then next thing we're arguing about Nintendo, which is like the biggest gaming pastime of the last 30 years. But anyway, if you guys don't mind, let's get what you're playing going real quick, and we'll start with you again, Ernesto, since we had our previous one sort of aborted.
All right.
And hopefully everything goes smoothly now.
Do I just mention what I'm playing, or do you want me to go into each game, or?
Just run with it, dude. Like, go all out. We got like 90 minutes.
All right. No, well, right now I'm basically on a Metroidvania fix. So I'm just going into Metroidvania full style, and I'm playing 3 different ones, and I'm really liking how each one like really does something different. And those 3 games are The Mummy Demastered. I'm playing that on PS4, but it's out everywhere. And then Hollow Knight, which I believe it's only available now on PC. Yes, it is. And the third one is Dead Cells, which is not even finished yet. It's my first game playing on an early access game. So those 3 games.
Which one's early access?
Dead Cells. It's not finished yet.
I thought they brought that out on Switch, or is that still TBD?
No, still. So they nothing yet. Like I was checking into it. Actually, both Dead Cells and Hollow Knight, because of the reasons we just talked about, I'm been looking for stuff to play on my Switch. I wanted to get them on Switch, but Dead Cells I haven't seen anything other than a mock-up of the box art. And Hollow Knight, they just announced a couple days ago that they are going to push that back into 2018. So I just decided to buy it on the Steam sale.
No, it was Dead Cells 2018?
Yeah, I guess so, because we're in December now, and that game is not even done yet.
I didn't realize
they just did an update in 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it came out in August, actually, on PC. I could be wrong, though.
Maybe early access.
Huh.
So, what do you think of them, each of them?
Well, like, I started out with Mummy Demastered. That's the one I've been playing the most. I really like that one because basically Metroidvanias are either shooty like Metroid, or they're like hack and slashy like Castlevania. And the shooty ones, I don't see that often. And Mummy Demaster is one of those. It totally feels like a Super Metroid clone. Like you have the same abilities. Well, similar to like you have the dash to break walls and stuff like that. Different guns to collect. It's very fun so far. The whole art style is really beautiful sprite work, and I'm a sucker for sprite graphics. Like it just looks so nice, and when they animate them, like beyond the capabilities of what the Super Nintendo could do, it just looks really impressive to me. But yeah, the game is based on the recent The Mommy movie, which was a total disaster.
Like
what's that?
Sophia, whatever the hell her name is, and Tom Cruise going.
Yeah, that's the one. So it's based on that.
That the 2D game, The Mummy Demastered, is based on the movie.
Yeah, it's based on the Mummy movie.
Wow. Okay. Is it a?
And I was mentioning before that Way Forward does this a lot. They take weird licenses and they make games out of them, really cool ones. They have a Zelda, both a Zelda 2 clone and a Zelda Super Nintendo clone based on Adventure Time, and they are actually pretty good games.
Adventure Time fucking rocks.
Yeah, dude, I love it. They actually did a really cool 2D action game based on Blood Rain, that old PS2 game that really sucked.
Right. And that was one of the early booby games.
Yeah, it was really good. And so they do stuff like that like this a lot. Previously, they had done Metroidvania based on the Alien license. Around the time where Colonial Marines came out.
Huh.
And it was really good. And in many ways, this Mommy Demastered feels like a spiritual sequel to that. Like it has a lot of similar mechanics. And it's just I've been really enjoying it. It's the one I've been playing the most. The music is like this synth heavy 80s soundtrack, and it just the areas are really fun to explore. But it's been getting kind of not so good reviews because it while it's really fun to play, it does a couple of things like backwards. For example, when you get to a save point, it doesn't heal you up. So in the game, you waste a lot of time just farming for health. And the game is kind of it pushes back a little. Like enemies will like kill you outright if you're not careful. So you have to be real careful when you go into the areas. Make sure you're killing them from afar with the gun, and then be real careful because you can die like real easily. But and then once you die, it has this souls mechanic where basically the mummy revives your body into a zombie, and you have to you're taken back to the save point or whatever save point you were at last, and you have to go up to that zombie, kill it so you can get your gear back. And so far I haven't had that much issue because I'm really careful going into areas, but I did have it happen one time where I died in a boss room. So it meant that I had to go into the boss room, kill that zombie, which is kind of a really tough enemy, and then work on the boss. So it's stuff like that that's annoying, and there's no reason why you shouldn't get like a heal station or like just a save point healing you. Like it really sucks having to spend 20 minutes just farming for health. So it's stuff like that that's kind of weird. Also, it doesn't mark in your map when you get to an item you can't reach. So I had to print out a map of the game, and I have a pen and paper thing going on where I mark stuff I can't get to, and that's the way I've been doing it. And every modern Metroidvania like marks it on your map, so you know, oh, I missed that, I should go there. So
do you think that was an intentional design choice to make it harder?
I do. I think that's they're like trying to make it distinctive that way. They're like trying to be more old school, I guess. But it's more annoying than anything.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And I think that's the only thing like taking it back from being like a fully recommended title that everybody loves. Like I've been reading stuff from like Jeremy Parrish and people like that know their retro gaming stuff, and they all the comments are all the same. Like it's really good, but it has all these things holding it back.
What was the one you were playing last night?
Hollow Knight.
Because that one, the art style was crazy.
That is just beautiful, man. I was really impressed by it. And I'm so glad I stopped because I've been wanting to play that since it came out I think it came out in May, but I never got it on PC. I don't play that much PC to begin with, but I was waiting for it on Switch, and when they delayed it for 2018, I was like, I'm done waiting. I really want to play this, and that one is really good because while Mommy Master gave me that Super Metroid fix, so to speak, Hollow Knight is more kind of feels like Dark Souls. Like the way you explore around, you have all this areas like really beautiful. You don't know what's going on. The lore is really limited. You kind of like have to start making stuff up to like fill the gaps of what's going on. And like the way you explore the world now, like last night, I really liked it because I started basically you start in a city that it's dead at the moment, and I'm gonna guess that as you find people, they start populating the city, pretty much like uh, Dark Souls, Souls game. But then you start, and you can either go right or left. And I started going right, and eventually I made it all the way around back to the surface. Like I made a full circle, and that just felt really cool. And the way you open up shortcuts and stuff, and the art is so beautiful. And actually, it also has that concept of when you die, there's a phantom where you died, and you have to go back and hit it to get all your XP back. Uh, and it didn't happen, but I'm gonna guess that if you die on the way, you lose that XP forever. So, but it feels much more what's the word lenient than Mommy Demastered. It's hard. It's a hard game, but I feel it's more fair, like the way you play around it. And I'm really enjoying it. I only played it one night, but I was really impressed by it. I don't know if I'm gonna keep streaming it. I don't know if that's the kind of game you can engage people to keep watching because it's a Metroidvania. I don't know if that works, but I'm definitely gonna keep playing it.
Yeah, because when I was watching you last night, it looked pretty brutal. Like you were getting some good cuss words out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that because I guess that's one that's more slashy, whereas the Mummy one's more shooty.
Exactly.
Like we were talking about.
Right.
So we talked a bit about the Metroid part of these. What is the Castlevania part of these?
Well, in the Mummy Demaster is the last Castlevania of them. But in both Dead Cells and in Hollow Knight, you get to level up. You get to change equipment and level that up, level up skills, and that's the more RPG aspect that Castlevania brought forward.
Where I go wrong with this is the fact that I'm just really fucking old, and my Castlevania knowledge mostly stops after 3.
Yeah. So yeah,
and there's Pamela.
The big split for that happened with the DS, or actually the GBA Castlevania games, because those took after Symphony of the Night. Symphony of the Night was a fairly. You played through Symphony of the Night, right?
I played a little bit of it.
Oh, geez. I don't know how I let you miss that one. So
it was 2D, and I graduated.
So, yeah, the whole Metroidvania is just around basically Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which spawned 3 games then on the GBA, 3 games on the DS, where you're exploring a Metroid type map. But Castlevania A, you're using a sword instead of a gun for the most part, sword and or whip. B, you generally have equipment, so you'd equip like a weapon, armor, accessory, that type of thing, and you'd have leveling up. Whereas Metroid was more very similar maps, 2D. The built-in hook with Metroid was always locked to progression, so you would learn some skill, then have to revisit older parts of the map where you can now progress. So Metroidvania was anything that had that type of aesthetic and any type of progression hooks, whether it be through leveling, new weapons, skills, whatever, where you're constantly going back through these 2-dimensional maps to get further.
Okay. So there you go. You've been playing anything else, Ernesto?
Yeah, the last one is Dead Cells. Dead Cells is really interesting because it's the only one of the 3 that's the most out there of the formula, and that one has roguelike elements. Do you know what that is, Blaine?
Yeah, it's when you rage quit, or it's a game that's built for making me rage quit.
Yeah, so in this one, when you die, the whole map it resets and it's randomly generated. So you start out with like some base equipment. You can choose either a sword, a shield, or I mean, you can choose the sword, and then you can choose between having a shield or a bow. And I went bow. And it's really fun. It's really action, like heavy combat, very reminiscent of something like Devil May Cry, where you have to juggle between sword and long range weapons. Um, but in a 2D aspect, and it's a really cool Metroidvania like map to explore. And then you find little skills as you're exploring that I believe I'm not 100% sure they are permanent. So even if you die, you still have that stat boost. So you get stronger in each round as you go, and eventually you can manage to get all the way to the end, basically. So you have those stat boosts that you find as you're exploring, and then once you switch between areas, um, you can buy unlockables that are permanent. Those one I'm sure they're permanent, uh, and they're like basically like health vials to heal up, different abilities, or you can unlock the ability to have better starting weapons when you start a round. But it's basically it's really interesting, and I have never played anything like it before. A Metroidvania where when you die, it just resets everything, and it feels like playing what's that movie that Live Die Repeat? Like you're just going over and over. Like, okay, I know how to beat you now. All right, I know how to beat this, and when I see a trap, I know how to do that. And then it's a learning process that just it feels like a really organic experience. Like you're going with it as it changes. It's been really fun so far, and I haven't gotten to a boss room or anything because I just keep dying. But I just started out. But I do feel the progression coming where every time I start, I'm like, okay, I know what to do now, and I'm stronger now. I take down enemies faster. And then the other thing where that's really cool, the Metroid element of finding an ability that lets you access areas you couldn't before. Well, in this one, because the game is randomly generated, you'll see like maybe you'll see like a different type of room with like I learned the ability to create vines that I can climb, and that let me bypass the first area, the first random area of the game, and just I used a vine and I jumped immediately into the second area. So it's really cool stuff, and I imagine that's what it's gonna be like. It's gonna be like you're gonna keep exploring these areas, looking for abilities to bypass areas, and until eventually you just get to the end. It's really different, and it's punishingly hard, but it's really rewarding when you start clicking with the game.
But you historically like the really punishingly hard stuff, right?
I do.
What is it about that you enjoy so much?
Oh man, I don't know. It's just that happiness of working through it, of not giving up, of like using it like as a learning experience. Like, okay, don't get frustrated. I know I can do this, and it's just a personal accomplishment to get over a hurdle like that. Like, oh, I did it. All right, I knew I could do it, and I did it. It's a personal satisfaction. It's a really fun cycle for me personally.
Yeah, see, it's interesting because I'm going to talk about Elex in a moment, and that's my first real flirtation in years with that kind of shit. But
Edge of Tomorrow, Ron said. Thank you, dude. That's the one.
Yeah, he says Edge of Tomorrow Duffus. Now, I know his English isn't very good, but he should be able to at least spell doofus, but I don't know. So, Mr. Anthony, what's your plan?
So this is where it actually gets a little interesting. So I'd finished Nier Automata. That's the one I was raving about for a while. And before
is this your 18th time through or 19th?
Huh?
18th or 19th time through?
No, that so 4.5, I guess.
Okay.
Is that how many playthroughs it takes to see the whole story?
I'm being a smartass.
No, there's basically, so if I go all the way back to Nier Automata, I finished that a few weeks back, but the only reason I bring that one up is because it caught me so off guard. I don't know why I was drawn to it, probably just because it was so Japanese, and I kind of missed that. I had just come off of Final Fantasy 15, which was a little bit disappointing on the story front, and I really do miss those types of just out there ways of delivering something. Like, I don't mind that Final Fantasy goes a bit over the top, but I want it to at least make sense.
Hey, Corey.
And Nier Automata is one that started off just completely crazy. And despite that, by the end, probably had more to say than any game that I've played in years, which is very surprising.
I don't know. I started that game. I plan to keep going at it, but the beginning is just crazy. Like, it's just craziness in your face. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, I don't know what they're talking about. They're using terms I don't know yet. I'm just overwhelmed.
What's funny is that by the end, it has some very, very strong messages just about society and how we approach everything, which that's what caught me off guard. There are a few scenes that because it is goofy, right? Any game where you have the main characters dressed like that, or specifically the main female protagonist dressed like that, you think is not going to be something that has any type of meaningful message. And to have it actually come through, even the method of storytelling, we bring up these random faults. And the biggest fault that I had is that there were some parts that were very grindy. So once you get into the game, especially on the first playthrough, you get to a point where it opens up and it's supposed to be open world. And the quests really take you through some sparsely populated areas that aren't that much fun. The combat's pretty good. It switches between sort of like your Bayonetta type game and a shooter, which is not a very in-depth shooter, but is still enjoyable, and layers on leveling up and weird sort of equipment progressions. But the catch for me and why it stuck was its method of storytelling, and what it had to say was very surprising for what it was. Not to mention the method of delivery. So one of the biggest things is, Blaine, what you were alluding to, and this is what turned me off to it, is the statement that I have to play through it like 5 times to get the story. Well, your first time through, just as no spoilers, just a general overview, your first time through will probably run you about 12, 14 hours. Second time through is the same story from the other character's point of view, which has, I'd say, about 50% new content, 50% content. You're just controlling the other character. And that'll take probably, let's say, 8 hours. Third time through takes place after the first 2 times and is 100% new. So when you hear like, I'm going to have to play through the game 4 times, you think that it's just a few sparse little changes. This is more than that, though I would say the second time through, I had to really focus for a while to push myself through it. But the overall package puts it up there definitely, especially for this year. It's between that and Zelda, the most impactful things that I've played this year.
So and would you say that third round is where the magic happens?
It doesn't take till the third round.
Okay.
There were points in the first playthrough when I got near the end that it was definitely, that's where it had me hooked. Where it almost lost me a little bit was in that second playthrough, probably about 3 hours in, just because I didn't like the style of the character. The combat in the second playthrough, controlling him, was not as enjoyable because he only has one attack button and then he can hack enemies. And when you hack, you go into a mini shooter game, and that shooter, the twin stick portion of that, wasn't that enjoyable when you repeat it over like 50 times. But that was his only efficient way of dealing with especially more powerful enemies. So personal preference, I felt the gameplay loop was the weakest the second time through. And also those times where, like I said, where it dragged down in the first playthrough, where you're doing like side quests, that type of thing, having to do it a second time around wasn't the best. But when you're talking an overall, let's say 40-hour experience for everything, it is highly, highly recommended. Definitely something that should be stuck, at the very least, make it to the first ending and make your decision then. But if that's worth it, just know that the minor slog parts in your second playthrough, I feel like an idiot trying to explain this, but the slog parts in the second playthrough are well worth getting through, knowing that if I would have known that the third playthrough was 100% new content, because I tried not to read anything about it. If I would have known that, it would have helped quite a bit in getting through those slow parts in the second playthrough. That's the only reason why I bring it up.
Okay, fair.
You know, the first word that comes to mind when people use the word slog is hinterlands. And like, I want a t-shirt that made up that says, I survived the hinterlands. Like, do you guys remember Dragon Age Inquisition? This little game that came out a couple years ago.
I think that
30 hours in that.
I did all the side quests before leaving the hinterlands.
Yeah, me too.
So that was what, like 40 hours?
Yeah, I would say about 30, 40 hours just in that area.
That is like, you talk about goofy ass game design. Even though I love BioWare, that one I was like, the fuck were you guys thinking?
Yeah, my issue with that is I'm a completionist with games. Like, I'm not happy until I see that 100%, or if I get the platinum or all the achievements or whatever. And in that area, I was like, oh yeah, I need to do everything before I move on. And I did that with every area, and at the end, I feel like such a short. I was so fed up with that kind of mechanic that I didn't play an open world game for like a year and a half after Dragon Age. Well, and what bothers me the most is that they didn't communicate well what was the proper way to play the game. I thought the proper way to play the game was to do everything. And when the proper way to play the game is to do enough to get enough, what was that currency, power, influence, whatever?
Yeah.
To open up the missions that you needed. And I ended up finishing the game, and I had 100, I remember the number, 198 of whatever currency that was. That was never to be used because I had unlocked everything. But I had almost 200 points of currency that didn't go anywhere. It was just wasted time. It's just bothered me. Every time I think about that game, I get mad.
Well, the biggest problem I had, first of all, Dragon Age is my favorite series, and that was by far my least favorite of the series. And It does open world badly. The characters were okay, but the biggest problem with the slog aspect was the fucking combat was so boring. Where like I was playing Origins the other night and I was like, oh my god, this feels so good. It's a perfect balance of tactical and like, you know, then I had a moment where I used a shield bash on a guy and I knocked the motherfucker across the room and then run my sword through him, and everything about it felt good. But then like Inquisition, I just remember clicking a lot, and it was just so boring. And I think you can only use like 8 different powers at a time or something like that. But
well, the funny part is you can't even blame consolification, so to speak, on it,
right?
Because Knights of the Old Republic was perfect on Xbox.
Oh yeah,
and it had the Dragon Age Origins combat. But for whatever reason, they decided, let's make things hard on ourselves. Let's have a PC version of Dragon Age, and let's have a console version. And never the twain shall meet. Like, it is remarkably different experience.
Origins and 2, that's true, but Inquisition is the same.
Inquisition, yeah, they merged it back, and I just wonder if that's why it lost quite a bit, even on PC.
The reason why is because they added multiplayer, and they wanted one combat engine, and what they did was on single player, you can hit spacebar or whatever it is to pause it, and that's the only difference. So, I guess I don't know. That game is.
I really wanted a proper sequel to Origins, and it seems like I'll never get that.
But you got to get those. You got to have the loot boxes. In order to have loot boxes, you have to have multiplayer. So, there you go.
Yeah, but bringing it back to a Nier, when I heard that you had to replay the game because of the same thing I said before about being a completionist, I was like, I need to see the whole story, otherwise it's gonna feel weird. And when I heard about replaying the game over and over, I thought each playthrough was like an RPG that took me like 40, 50 hours, and that's where I got overwhelmed. I didn't know that a regular playthrough would take like 14 hours or so. And now I'm really motivated to go through it, actually.
But it is highly recommended.
Didn't The World Ends With You do something like that?
If I could have ever focused on any DS game long enough, I might be able to tell you.
I don't know. Like, The World Ends With You was so cool, but I never finished it.
So, I never did either, yeah. I actually rebought it on mobile just to give it a try again, but I've yet to give it a try.
I think I looked at it, but it was like $30 or something.
Yep. That's the Square Enix way. Expensive mobile games.
Expensive mobile games that then they abandon and never update for newer versions of iOS.
Right.
That's true. So, one last question about Nier. Actually, 2. 1, what does it have to do with the prior Nier games?
Prior Nier.
And 2, how would you describe the combat?
1, I have no idea because I didn't play any of the prior games. So from what I understand, I looked up a timeline on everything because it goes all the way back to like Drakengard, I think.
Yeah.
And this takes place like thousands of years after that one, but not one bit of the story requires you to play anything. From what I understand, everything else took place centuries before, so it's not even the same world, essentially. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. I mean, there's a lot of people saying it's a similar argument because I always get worried as well. Like even with like the Marvel Universe movies, like I skipped a ton of them. And then everybody's like, oh no, yeah, you can skip those. But then there's all these references to characters that I have no clue what the hell is going on. But in this,
and then you'll have somebody next to you like, oh yeah, that part. And you're like, what?
Yeah, like the only reason I thought of that is because everybody's like, oh, go see Thor Ragnarok. I'm like, I didn't watch the other 2 movies. What the hell is going to happen? Oh, you don't need to. Just go watch the new one. So Nier, it's 100% just go into Automata. I would not bother going back and trying to play the original ones. Maybe from what I've heard, I wasn't that familiar with this director and his unique methods of conveying.
What's his name?
He's very eccentric.
What is it?
I don't know. I just call him the Moon Guy.
Yeah, he wears the big fucking bowl on his head.
Well, that's it. That's one of the characters in Nier. That's the only. So his way of conveying a message using the medium is what impressed me the most, I think.
Yeah, he seems to like sort of critique the medium as he makes the game, right?
Well, and there's a few ways where he makes you feel an emotion through a strange mechanic of delivery in the game. And then later you're like, holy crap, I felt that emotion, and that's what I was supposed to feel. But like at the time, like if he wants you to feel frustrated, he will make you feel frustrated. And you will get through it, but the way that you feel after you get through it is only possible because he made you feel frustrated, but he made you do that in a weird way. It's almost impossible to explain, and that's why I liked it, is because the experience of doing it, especially in the age of like YouTube, Twitch, that type of thing, anytime I have an experience, and I think there's no way in hell I would have felt the same way had I watched somebody play it, that is special to me. So it's rare when I can say something like that I feel like a game was special in that way. That's why I'm so high on recommending it, especially to anybody who is a fan of sort of the quirky, different like Japanese style and approach to games, like in the late 90s and some of the really strange PlayStation games, because it has that strangeness. But in this case, I think that the payoff is so great that it's very universal. So even if you're not into sort of the more quirky things, you don't need to be to really get something out of the overall message. The combat, think of it as like a stripped down version of like a Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, something like that. You can do some juggling. You have a light, heavy attack. You can choose which weapon to equip on both. Very basic combos. A dodge button rather than a block button. So you want to do perfect evades a lot of the time. It is not, I wouldn't call it overly difficult. I played through it on normal, and I am not a Dead Souls or Dark Souls, kind of person. So if I can get through that on normal, I think most people could. You can always power level if you feel like it to get around any perceived difficulty if need be. But the combat is essentially dodge and attack. And the nuance to that is on what chips you equip. So you have a certain amount of slots, and you can even, if you want to equip, let's say a slot, you equip something that makes you heal every time you deal damage with melee. Or you can equip something that if you don't take damage for 2 seconds, you start to heal yourself. Or there's flat damage reduction from ranged or flat damage reduction from up close. Each of those, depending on how powerful, takes up a certain amount of slots. Let's say you want more slots. They even let you, are like, hey, you want more slots in your system memory? Remove the mini map. You get a few slots back. You can remove the on-screen prompts for what button to hit. You get a little space back. You remove the OS and you explode. But it's stuff like that that's just really quirky, and there is some depth to it. But yeah, the combat, I the same thing to do with the shooting parts. It's not as refined as some of those games in the genre, but it is good enough that it feels good. It's very fluid, and it is fun for the duration of the game. Even though, like I said, on the parts where it became a little bit of a slog, it is not as in depth as some of those other games where you can equip, like even in God of War, you can equip like vastly different weapons at certain points where you end up getting them, and it changes up your combat style. In this, you just have a light weapon and a heavy weapon. So it's never going to get as in depth as some of those games, which is why I'm glad that it actually doesn't overstay its welcome in that respect.
Yeah,
is it mostly an action game? Because I at least for that, I only played like the first chapter or whatever. or the intro, I guess, and it would switch a lot between action and then overhead, and then it would actually go into like a shmup kind of thing. And
Yeah, there's some side-scrolling stages where it still controls like the normal ones. There's some where it's open world. There's some where it's top-down. There's some twin stick shooting sections. There's some vertical scrolling shooting sections. So it hops between everything. The vast majority is your generic open world, which is probably like 80%, 85% of the game, where you're following behind the character with your camera, have free reign over the camera controls.
Is it an interesting open world to explore, or is it just there? Like,
there is a very large desert area that I would say no. Aside from that, there are almost every other area in the city. Anything where it's set in a mostly destroyed city, it has somewhat of a beauty to it. And some of the locales are so quirky that it really grasps you. And the biggest thing is what happens in those locales. So I think that it's aside from the desert area, which is one of the first areas you go to, that's where I said that it got a little bit slow, because running through that area, it's very sparse, uninteresting. Almost every other area in the game is immensely superior to that. So if you're feeling sort of down on the desert part, just know once you get past that, every other area is better.
it's just interesting to me as well that so many different areas and everything, and it's all contained in a 14-hour playthrough. Like, to me, the conception of a short RPG. Maybe it's because it's more of an action game than an RPG, or I don't know. I haven't played it, but it feels refreshing to know that I would be able to knock out a playthrough in less than 20 hours.
And that was, it felt really good to be able to do that. It did not overstay its welcome. And anytime where I did start to feel like it was a slog, I mean, that's where I don't want to let that sour somebody's thought on my opinion of it, because it is quick enough, and hope that's why I wanted to bring up the play times. It is quick enough that even when that feeling starts to go on, I never had to deal with that feeling for like 2 hours of gameplay. It was always like, oh, I'm getting kind of tired of this, but soon enough it would move on.
Awesome. I'm definitely interested. Actually, I've been listening to the soundtrack. I haven't played it, but the soundtrack is phenomenal. I have it on iTunes, and I just listen to it all the time.
That is the other thing. This goes back to the era of like where Square was putting out some of the best music, bar none. I mean, this is one of those, even if you never play the game, if you're a fan of game soundtracks, heads and shoulders above anything that I've heard in recent memory. It's just
so Yoko Taro is the director.
Yes, that's him. Yeah.
And actually, the composers I've never heard of, which is unusual. Like, I'm usually pretty up on that, but it's two composers, Keiichi Okabe and Keigo Hoashi. So,
yeah, I don't know if they have. This is where I'm sort of letting you down, but I don't know if they have a certain level of pedigree for this type of stuff, or if it was a flash in the pan or what. But it is amazing.
I believe I may be wrong, but I believe one of them composed the soundtracks for Drakengard.
Which would
I
make
wouldn't be
sense.
surprised if they did the previous games. I just don't remember those being lauded for their soundtracks.
Right. I enjoyed Drakengard a lot in its time, even though it was really weird. It was really repetitive, but there was something about it. Maybe because at that time I hadn't played any other dark fantasy games. That was probably my first dark fantasy game. Just felt really good to be in that world, even though it was so weird. I really enjoyed the first one and the second one too. And the third one I didn't like, so I never went into Nier either. So, but I do want to jump into Nier Automata or whatever you say it. It's in my list of to go games.
So my final year of college, after Tony moved out, I had a Japanese roommate, and he had a Japanese PS2, and
I got to see all these crazy ass Japanese games in Japanese, and on top of that, I was smoking a lot of weed and drinking a lot, and so it was like this perfect adventure into madness. And one of them was one of the Drakengard games. I don't remember which one. It was 2003, 4, somewhere in there. He also played a game called Dragon Dragoon.
Yeah, that's Dragon Guard, yeah.
Say what?
That's Dragon Guard.
Is it?
Yeah. That's the Japanese name for it.
Okay. Well, so that was one of the wildest games I've ever seen. And I want to say that there's a part where guys running around with a guitar and doing shit. Or maybe I'm confusing my Japanese games. I don't know. But
I don't remember a guitar.
So I'm probably confusing two games because I don't know. That was also, I saw Final Fantasy X2 or 10-2 completely in Japanese before it came out. And then, a game called, it's spelled the same as the state Michigan. Like it looks like Michigan, but it's Michigan, which is Japanese for something. And it was a horror game. It did come out in the States. I don't remember what the name was, but this is back like the classic Japanese horror days. And I don't know, it was cool. You guys just got me thinking about, many moons ago when I was a younger lad. But yeah. So, Anthony, you got anything else?
Yeah, so originally I actually hadn't even planned on talking about Nier, but the odd thing that I did after that, before I could hop into any other big open world games, because I had left earlier in the year, I left Breath of the Wild and Horizon Zero Dawn. For whatever reason, I just had a really busy summer, so I'd sort of put them on a shelf. And I couldn't go straight back to them after Nier for some reason. So I decided to actually install and play through Quantum Break.
No shit.
I always wanted to because I like time travel as a concept, but I had heard it was so terrible that I just sort of put it off. But I don't remember if crap. Now I'm trying to remember their last game with the flashlight.
What platform?
PC.
Alan Wake.
Yeah, I played Quantum Break on PC. So Alan Wake, I don't remember if it was as janky, but
no.
Quantum Break, it feels like my character is always lumbering and has too much momentum in any given direction where he must carry out some form of animation, to where I always felt like it was this weird disconnect between I can move so quickly and do so many cool things with time powers, but I feel so awkward just walking around. So it's split between combat sequences and really, really basic traversal puzzles, and the traversal parts feel terrible. And the combat feels okay, but is never a challenge in the least bit. And then you get like this TBS level quality, like half-hour episodes after every chapter.
Half hour? Damn, that's a full episode.
It's over 20 minutes long, each of them are. And before you do that, it basically says hit L for good guy choice, or hit L for Paragon, hit R for Renegade. And it basically dictates the cutscene path that you take. So it's a very strange trying to meld so many different things, none of which it really pulls off. And I like time travel, and I really like some parts of it, but the game feels so disjointed. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but if you love time travel, I think that it's at least something interesting to play through. The only other thing that I bring up is it has one of the worst final boss encounters that I've ever played, especially if you are even slightly red-green colorblind, because it has crap going off where you have to notice a color change, and if you don't get away from this certain hue of red, you instant die.
I didn't know you were colorblind.
There's certain, it's mainly when I get into the tertiaries, I have a hard time telling certain things apart when they're next to one another. And so I could never see this insta-death coming. And I looked online and other people were complaining about it as well. And it's nothing like any other encounter in the entire game. And nothing frustrates you more than just dying for what, like in my eyes, appear to be absolutely no reason at all. So maybe it's incredibly easy because it was split between people saying it's impossible and people saying it's a joke and it's incredibly easy. Either way, it is nothing like any combat situation in the game up to that point. So it was a weird game. I'm glad I played through it, but the biggest thing is I finally went back through Breath of the Wild, which I actually just finished 2 nights ago. So
Nice.
I was taking it a little bit slower. My son, who's only 5, became enamored, especially with watching me get through the Divine Beasts, and was just very hyped to be able to see Ganon killed. So I was sort of waiting until I had enough time to show him that on nights where I wasn't playing too late, that type of thing. But
that final boss, I really, really enjoyed it.
yeah, that was actually really cool. The Zelda is one of those games that I completely, it's another one that I could completely understand if somebody hates it. And it was one of them and for me, Fallout, Skyrim, a lot of those games are the same way. I do not look forward to playing it until I'm playing it. And I know that that's a weird sort of thing to convey, but it comes from anything that is that big a world, but doesn't have the same type of progression hooks. And it's something that almost mentally in this day and age, I almost need to force myself to get over. And maybe it's because of my age and maybe it's because of the amount of free time I have. But the beauty in Zelda is when you can spend an hour trying to get some mundane small accomplishment. And sort of what you were bringing up with the difficulty and why you enjoy banging your head against the wall in those games. And it's another thing that I struggle with being able to get over is because you can spend an hour and not make any progress. And if I'm having fun, why should I care? But something in me still cares. And I have a hard time shutting off that instinct for some reason. But when I'm able to and just lose myself in Zelda, before I know it, like 4 hours have passed. I've had a blast, but maybe I've only done like 2 of the 120 shrines and found like 3 Korok seeds. And it's when it clicks, it is amazing. And that's another one, sort of like the original Portal, where I enjoyed banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out how to work out puzzles within the game's mechanics, because everything that they built, I swear I solved probably a third of those shrines in a way that I almost felt like nobody else did. And I actually looked at some of them later, and there was an immensely easier way for me to do it. I just didn't think of it. But the systems are built in a way that you can manipulate your different powers that you get to create your own solutions within this physics-based world. And that achievement is something that I love about games being that level of organic success. And it's something that I just, looking back on it, and I mentioned this on one of the posts on the Facebook group, I feel like people have discounted it a little bit. I don't know if it's because anything that gets that much hype, that much positive buzz, or because it came out earlier in the year, but it was just so enjoyable for me to go back to that world. And I actually was sad when I finished the game. I wanted to create other tasks for myself. And to be fair, I think I finished with 60 some odd shrines complete out of the 120. But I probably have to go back and like use a map or something like that if I ever wanted to discover it. It seems insane that I only went through about half of the game's content.
When I finished the game, I had like 60 as well. And I had to use a map, and I did them all, and it was like, whoa! I would never look in this tiny corner. Like it's really clever the way they had them.
And the only weird part, and this is something that I think is worth bringing it up, especially when it comes to Nintendo, is the way the game was structured. in all the advertisements, you'd see it would make it feel like it was a cutscene heavy Zelda, right? Very heavy on story compared to the old games. At least that's the impression I got. When you'd watch a trailer, you'd see Zelda's character, you'd see her crying and upset, and you'd see Link going through the world, and you'd be like, holy crap, this is Nintendo coming into true like storytelling, and there's voice acting and all that stuff. In reality, there's only a total of, I think it's 18 scenes. I want to say it's 18. And they're little like vignettes that are probably 2 to 3 minutes long each total. And aside from actually they're all 100% optional. And 13 of them are tied to a single side quest that gives you almost no direction on how to find them whatsoever. So I would say that probably 90% of the people that play through the game would not see any of the cutscenes that they saw advertised, which is just strange. I mean, I can't even say that it's bad or good. It's strange to me.
Right, because they give you at the beginning of the game, when you get to the first town, they give you a quest to look for all the cutscenes, basically, because they're memories.
Yeah. But they don't
tell you where they are. It's like, go off and find them.
Yeah, they're like, this world is like however many square miles, and we're going to give you 13 pictures. Find these 13 locations. And you're just like, You want me to what?
But like, as weird as that sounded at first, it was really cool. It didn't happen like as often as I wanted to, but it was really cool when you would walk in an area and be like, wait, is this the area from the photo? And then you would look at the photo, and you would look at the area, and you're like trying to work it out. And when it worked and you found the area, it felt really rewarding.
And see, I was at the end. I had finished the 4th Divine Beast, and I hadn't found a single one. So that is something that I had to look online, because I'm like, I have to find these. Like, I want to actually. I feel weird. I'm not going to fight Ganon having not seen a single cutscene. So I had to look online for that. And like the one that and the reason was I thought that you had to use the camera, because it didn't even convey in the game that there was going to be like a little glowy point that you go up and hit a button. Like, right. I thought that I had to take a picture that matched the picture in my camera. So one of them was like a picture of this generic gate, and I swore I found the exact thing. And it turns out when I looked later in a guide, I had found the exact thing. It's just I was at the west gate instead of the east gate. I had no way of knowing. So I thought it was just, I'm not taking a picture right. So there's a difference between letting you figure stuff out organically and making it so you pretty much have to luck into one of them to even understand how that system works from that point on. Like, if I knew that there's a little glowy spot on the ground where they all were, I probably would have actually been able to seek them out and find them easier. But after failing at that one, because I couldn't get it to register, I just didn't try after that.
I did the way I figured it out. It was totally by accident. It was because it's one of the photos that's going into like a fountain. So there's only one area in the whole game that looks like it. And when I walked by, I saw the glowy spot. I was like, "What the hell is this?" And I touched it, and then I realized this is from the photo, so it's gonna be glowy spots. Okay, but otherwise, I would have been lost as well.
I never walked past that point until I was looking at a guide on how to find the memories. So I never, but yeah, I know the horse statue one.
Yes.
See, I was at the one with the weird lake that looks like it's like the straight line across the top and it goes down the middle. It kind of looks like a thong.
Yes, I know the one, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one where I was at the wrong side.
Okay. Actually, right. Like, there were a couple things I had to figure out, like cooking. Like, I had to look on the internet how the hell to cook, like hold the ingredients and then throw them in the pot.
So I'm going to blow the whistle on the Nintendo Fat Fest here. So, Mr. Anthony, we've heard everything that you've played through this entire year up to this point. So, back to the original question. What you playing like in this weekend and in the future?
This weekend, I need to start back up with Horizon Zero Dawn. That's the other one that I dropped off of. It's just I was trying to find sort of a palate cleanser after Zelda.
Yeah, Zelda, like Wild Breath and Horizon Zero Dawn back to back. It might be too easy to compare them.
Well, I'm like 80% through on the Metroid 2 remake on 3DS, but that's another one where I got to a point where I almost got lost and I cramped my hand so much because you have to free aim a lot in that game, but you have to free aim by holding the trigger. You end up getting like the claw grip on your 3DS.
Oh no!
Into the old Mega Man X games.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably either going to start back up in Horizon Zero Dawn or try and finish up Metroid.
Okay. So we got about 30 minutes left. I'm gonna blast through my like weird European shit that I'm playing through this weekend. I've been playing Elex. I'm gonna keep playing it. The developers Piranhabytes, they did Gothic, they did the Risen series. They're one of those studios that's really well regarded everywhere but the US. And I've always wanted to play through one of their games. Like Gothic is so interesting, but it's so dated in some ways. It's a little hard to play. Plus, I have to completely remap the controls because German people apparently don't have human hands. They play games using some other appendage. I don't know what. But quit smiling like that. I'm not saying they're penis. But it's also actually, Elex is the hardest game that I have played since I was like 8 years old and playing the NES. Every enemy will one or two shot you if you aren't precise on every single thing. I actually streamed it over lunch the other day just to give people kind of a taste of what I'm talking about. But yeah, the combat's kind of like, it's almost reminiscent of the first Witcher, where it's a little bit rhythm based. And but yeah, I've got these like fucking rats that are like, haha, fuck you, and knocking me back 10 feet.
So is this like a really 3/4 view, or is it behind the character?
It's like The Witcher, like, so it's kind of over the shoulder, pulled back a little bit. Yeah, it's a bizarre game, and it's so funny because I actually had to read for like an hour about the combat. Like, and yeah, I was joking with Ernesto about this because this is what I tell him all the time, but I actually did it. I had to wade into forums to figure out how to play the fucking game because it doesn't teach you anything. And it's funny because all the Americans are like, this shit is broken. And all the Germans are like, haha, das ist noob. And, like it was so funny because it was like, it was divided along cultural lines in terms of whether or not the combat was totally broken. And so I had to do Google Translate on some of the German forums. And then I unlocked the secret to how to play the game, and I felt really smart. And then I went and died anyway.
That sounds like Dark Souls doing that.
So what?
That sounds like Dark Souls, going into forums, like reading up on stuff, like how do you do this? What's the best way to do this? And then you're like, okay, I'm ready. And then you, oh, I died anyways. All right, time wasted.
And it's hilarious. Yeah, well, you saw a little bit of it the other day on your phone, and then Mark hung around and actually like suffered through my suffering. But everything about the game is just, it is so unpalatable to so many. Like as I play it, I'm like, I don't know anyone that would like this, but I'm really enjoying it. There's just something about it that's just totally alien and really interesting. And the world is really cool because the world is post-apocalyptic. They call the world Magellan. This comet that had this shit on it called Elex hit the planet, and then it ruined everything. And there's these different factions. One faction's like yay nature, yay magic, fuck Elex, fuck technology. Another one's like yay technology. And then another one, the Albs embrace Elex, but it makes them emotionless. And yeah, you basically get to you end up picking a faction and then going through it. I'm explaining it badly.
Standalone? Like, is this just the first? You mentioned that they made all those other games. I wasn't sure if this is just a 100% self-contained or is this based on something?
This is totally new, and it's the start of a new series. Like the sequel's already in development because this thing is doing gangbusters everywhere but the U.S. And
Are they
it's
gonna
funny 'cause this is the
translate
game.
that to the US, or are they gonna keep it over there?
Oh no, it'll come out here.
Okay.
I'd be curious to see what its console footprint looks like in the future. I can't imagine these sell well on American consoles, but on Steam it does all right. Well, because like there's creepy old fucks like me that love this kind of shit. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna do another stream of it sometime that just kind of explains all the weirdness in it. But I don't know. I think it's fun. So there's that, and then tomorrow, or hopefully in a few hours, we get 7: The Days Long Gone releasing. That's out of Poland. The developer is called Fool's Theory, and it's open world, isometric, stealth, hardcore RPG. Like it's another game that just looks totally weird. Oh, steampunk. But yeah, it looks totally weird. Looks totally awesome, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. So I'll be playing a little bit of that. I'll actually probably do a first look sometime tomorrow, and then at some point this week I'll do some MMO action. You guys know me. I got to have at least some weekend dose of MMO, either SWOTOR or ESO. Probably ESO. It's amazing though, like hearing you guys talk and looking at what I'm playing. It's interesting. Like I don't know. At least as I've gotten older, I've definitely drifted in a certain direction. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way about your own game playing. Like you've sort of solidified into a certain area, or I don't know. But I don't know. Do you guys feel that way?
I'm still all over the map. It just really depends on what mood I'm in. But I find myself making my gameplay choices based on what I feel like my free time is going to look like coming up, more so than anything else. Like I used to really love Guild Wars, and when Guild Wars 2 came out, I put in damn near 80 hours. And I just dropped off of it, not because I tired of it, but just because the time commitment, I couldn't do it. Like with work, that was when I was starting to work like until like 2 a.m. a lot of nights and everything, and I couldn't keep up the progression with everyone. And the same thing is sort of after that, I've been almost terrified to get into that type of game again, not because I dislike them, but because of the time aspect. So I think I still like all the same games for the most part. It's just I know that I'm self-aware on the time thing. Like I have ESO. I ended up buying it when it was on sale, but I haven't even tried it yet. And I know that I want to play through at least single player, the Old Republic, because I absolutely adored the old Knights of the Old Republic games. And then the other aspect of it is stuff like Zelda, like getting over my fear of not accomplishing anything. But that comes back to time again. So I think my tastes are still the same. It's just I pick and choose based on the life situation and especially the time commitment that's required for some of these games.
What about you, E-Dog?
Yeah, I'm basically the same way too. Like I haven't really changed what I like. I do think about time a lot, but I just go with whatever my heart like wants to play. I mostly like to lose myself in an RPG, but when I finish one, because it takes me so long, because I want to do everything. Like Persona 5 took me 180 hours or so, and I played that. It came out in March, and I played that until June, which is, and I played like little games here and there, but that was like my main game. It took me months, and after that, I was like, okay, I need a break from RPGs. So when I finish a big one, a big game, I like playing like little small experiences. Like right now, I'm doing with the Metroidvanias. So I like to balance it out so that I try to play everything. I try to throw in at least a retro game here and there because that's what I like the most. as well as RPGs. So yeah, I just like balancing it out. But right now, like I'm gonna be playing that Metroidvania games, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is coming out tomorrow. And I was reading the reviews on it. It looks really good. Huh?
What's coming out tomorrow?
Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's basically the first RPG for the Switch.
Oh, you know what? You're saying Xenoblade. I was thinking Xenoblade, but yeah. Okay.
I'm really. I was like wondering if I was gonna play that, but I'm gonna go give it a chance. And that may take me all of December, so who knows? So yeah, I don't have the same time as I had before to play, but I just don't care anyways. I like going into a game and not having to worry about the time, and I think that's why I really like Souls game as well, because even if I may not make progress, I still enjoy the fun that I'm getting out of the learning process. So,
I will say, now that I think about it, the biggest change that I have is when I was younger. For instance, let's go back to like Final Fantasies on Super Nintendo or Chrono Trigger. Like Chrono Trigger, New Game Plus, I played that till I maxed out everybody. Final Fantasy VI, I played it till everybody had an economizer. I mean, stuff where I'd play through the game, even though it took 40, 50 hours. I'd play through it not only a second time, I'd play through it a second time to get it 100%. And this is before online, this is before achievements, that type of thing. I've tried so hard. Like the only retro game that I've managed to play through again was FF7 on Steam. I sat down and sort of forced myself through the beginning and ended up 100%ing it again.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I got everything except for there's some random Steam, like I even got the gold chocobo again.
Wow.
But there was some weird achievement on Steam for having like maxing out your gil that I didn't get. It was just absurd. But other than that, like I know, Blaine, I know you rebought every single flipping Final Fantasy game on Steam. I just can't bring myself to go back and play through them again. And that's been the biggest change, is like a good book where you just sit down and you read through it again. I felt the same way, or a movie that you love. I can't rewatch movies anymore, I feel like. Replay games. Once again, I don't know if that's just something with the age that I'm at, or more a representation of the time that we're living in. But either way, that I think is the biggest change from when I was younger.
I feel that way too, because when HD remasters or whatever come out, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play that again. But then I feel so guilty that I'm spending time on that game I already finished once, when I could be playing something new. And it's the reason why I stopped playing Final Fantasy. I bought Final Fantasy 12, the HD remaster. And at first I was like, oh man, this is beautiful. I'm really enjoying this. And then I had that guilt always in my head, like, man, you have all these games that are brand new you can be playing. And eventually I just stopped playing it. And I do that with Final Fantasy 10, 7, 9 came out as well. I just rebuy them, but I never play them because there's, especially this year is like jam packed. There's no time for like replays.
No, actually, it's been one of the best years in releases, and actually probably the best year of releases since 2007. And if you go look at Metacritic, and the top 3 Metacritic games this year are 3 of the highest rated ever. Zelda, Mario, and Divinity Original Sin 2.
Cool.
Those are they're regarded as 3 of the greatest games ever made, and they're all this year. And for me with the games, like Ernesto, you were mentioning kind of living in Persona for 3 months. That's kind of how I've been all year, where going backwards, I had Divinity Original Sin 2, and then Horizon Zero Dawn before that. I was doing Morrowind and ESO for a long time, Mass Effect Andromeda for a couple of months, Torment for a couple of months.
You did Uncharted and Lost Legacy in there too?
I got most of that in there. That's when I have to wait until Corey and I both have free time and don't feel like watching a show. and then we'll do a chapter in Uncharted whenever. So actually, I did finish Uncharted 4 this year. So actually, you know what though? One of the best games I played through this year, even though this is not even the topic, was Soma. That was so much goddamn fun. And I mean, part of that was the fact I was doing it for the Halloween stream, and so I had Ernesto and Joel with me all the time. But yeah, that was cool as hell.
That's interesting you bring that up, because what I really enjoyed about that time we were doing that little project was that I was making time for games that I would regularly wouldn't make time for.
Hey, Ernesto, your audio is a little janky.
Hold on.
Was he breaking up for you, Tony?
Yeah, I thought it might be because he was leaning back.
All right, how about now?
It's still a little fucked up.
And I'll shut up for a little bit. You guys keep talking in the meantime.
Well, actually, it's funny. We got about 13 minutes left, and I'm going to start wrapping things up here. So the idea is that this show will be Thursday evenings. At least that's the tentative idea. Maybe we'll move it. I like the Thursday evenings because it's, for the people that don't watch it live, they can listen to it or watch it while they're at work on Friday and get hyped for the weekend. But regardless, we're not doing it Thursday next week. The Game Awards is going on, and I have a middle school band concert to go to. So we're going to do it Friday night. And so far, the cast for it is looking jam-packed. So we're actually going to have, in theory, a huge group next week.
I'm hoping that'll happen.
Well, we'll see. And based on the three of us talking mostly just what you're playing, and we've been going for like an hour and 20 minutes or so. And I don't know. So it'll be interesting. We'll see. But yeah, so anyway, next week's episode will be mostly focused on the Game Awards. I personally don't give a shit about the awards because I am an angry old man, and I looked at the nominees for stuff and I was like, you people didn't even play the good shit. But actually, it's funny because actually for the nominees, I just voted like Horizon Zero Dawn straight down because that was the only one where I honestly do think that I can accept that as game of the year because it was so good. But anyway, the thing I'm most looking forward to is the trailers. And I don't even know what trailer I'm looking forward to. I guess maybe Anthem, even though I'm so suspicious of that game. But I don't know. What are you guys looking forward to with the Game Awards?
I just like making an event. Me and the wife and I would just take out food and maybe some drinks or whatever, and just enjoy the show. I like doing that with both the Game Awards and the Oscars. So I'm just looking forward to a good time, seeing what the awards are like, what people vote for. Trailers wise, I'm hoping for something Death Stranding that's not a weird teaser, that's like an actual trailer, but maybe that's wishing too much.
Yeah, Death Stranding. I'm so curious what that game actually is. We've seen the baby, we've seen dead fish, we've seen Daryl, we've seen Guillermo del Toro. Though if he really wants to knock it out of the park, he'll have David Hayter do a voiceover on the next one.
It's one of those games though in the back of my head, I just worry that's never gonna come out. Like it just feels like one of those projects right now.
Well, when you look at Metal Gear Solid 5, that took forever. But like the way I don't know if this is accurate, but I think that what took the most was him figuring out the Fox engine.
Oh, the Fox engine, yeah.
That's right. He did that world tour where he was looking at all this Sony studios to figure out what engine to use, and he ended up choosing the Horizon engine. What's the name of it? Something D. I don't remember the name. But yeah, he's using that engine for the game, so that the hard part is over for him. Now he just has to use that canvas to create a game. I don't know how long that'll take. It should speed up the process. I still don't think we'll see anything until like 2018, if anything.
Yeah, we're trying to think like what else we're waiting for next year. I mean, maybe a Dragon Age trailer, but I think EA wants to keep the focus on Anthem. Last of Us 2. And bear in mind too that the Game Awards is always right before PSX, and so Sony tends to have a pretty heavy presence at the Game Awards. So probably more God of War.
Like The Last of Us. If I look back on that game, I hated the actual act of playing through it. That's one, and I one of my firsts from this year. I watched my first game playthrough ever, and it was with RE7 because it was one of those games that I looked at and I'm like, I don't think that I would actually enjoy the moment to moment playing this game, but I really want to see what it has to offer. And I think looking back on Last of Us, I would have enjoyed it more had I just watched the whole damn thing.
Yeah, I put it down. Man, I'm trying to remember because I managed to actually suffer through the clicker guys, and I did actually like a lot of it, but I know what you're saying. It just didn't quite. The gameplay didn't quite hold me.
It was the clicker guys, or it was the clown car enemies, and it just didn't add anything to that world. But the story was so strong that I would have rather have sat down and watched it over like an hour a night for, however many nights, and just not have to, because whenever I die or have to replay a section, it just killed the story momentum, and the story was the reason I was playing it.
Yeah, if I could get Naughty Dog to stop doing one thing, it would be clown car enemies. That shit drives me crazy in Uncharted.
Actually, I'm thinking because I love Last of Us. I think it's one of the best games ever made. But I'm thinking of the game thing. I don't remember anything remarkable about it. I just remember going through it because the story was so good.
Ernesto, your audio is still fucked up, but if you speak up, it's a little bit better.
Last of Us, good. I like it. How's that?
Okay.
I've been practicing reading lips, so that's with The Last of Us. What stuck with me was that, yeah, a lot of the combat was intertwined with such strong story beats. Like I still, like, I almost get goosebumps thinking about when you had to play as, now I'm trying to remember the names of the characters. Younger girl when Joel's like almost dead and it's like time.
Ellie?
Yeah, and you're playing as her and Joel's like dying and it's like winter and you're trying to survive and everything. Like that whole chapter was just incredible. I mean, that wasn't even, I mean, there's so many really strong narrative parts, but yeah, the actual act of playing was never anything more than I felt like a slight step down from Uncharted. And Uncharted, I think that it's one of the weaker parts of the game itself.
Uncharted, I love the way it controls. Actually, the main thing that drives me nuts with Uncharted, like I said, is the clown car enemies, and they reuse the same mechanic in a level too many times. Like in Uncharted 4, and I got into a big argument with Jay about this. The exploding mummies. Did you guys play through that?
Yeah.
Like the first couple of times I was like, whoa, I'm surprised. And then the 18th time, I was ready to choke a motherfucker.
Then you land in a room and there's like 20 of them.
Yeah. And and then earlier in the game, there's a bit where you have to slide down gravel. And again, it's okay the first couple of times, but like the 15th fucking time I'm doing it, I'm like, guys, this is starting to feel like padding.
It's always the
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was perfect. But yeah, and I don't know, like Uncharted, I love the story. The combat really, I think, is fine. the traversal is pretty good. Actually, it's great. But yeah, just the reuse of mechanics within one level is just excessive. Except for Lost Legacy. Lost Legacy is the model I want them to use for every Uncharted going forward. Kind of short and sweet. The open world level was too long, but everything else I've really enjoyed.
Well, the open level is too long if you spend time on it. You can make it as short as you want. You can just, cause I know because I had to do a second playthrough to get the platinum. And I just breezed through it. I know exactly where to go. I just ran to the end when I had the key, and that's it. I closed the chapter.
You know, I could deal better with the open world level if there was a map quest built into that Jeep.
Ha! True that. All right, gentlemen.
It's nice when games do that, though, because like in a game like GTA 5, you had the map all the time telling you where to go. But in the original GTA 3, like you had to look for yourself, and you ended up learning that city. Like I still remember that city, where to go, what streets to go in. And you know, in Lost Legacy, I eventually learned a map where I knew exactly where to go, and I would pull up the map real quick just to make sure that I was going the right way. And then I would put it back down and just keep on driving. So it's funny the way the mind works, because once you have that crutch of the mini map, you just don't bother to learn a map.
All right, so I'm going to pull the plug here. We'll be back next Friday, December 8th at 9 p.m. Central, which is 10 p.m. Eastern, which is, 7 p.m. Pacific. And apparently there's some time zone in between Central and Pacific. I don't know what those
Mountain time.
What?
Mountain time zone.
Yeah, for like the 5 people that live there.
Yeah. Hey, it's showing us off air right now, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's for YouTube off air.
Okay.
But we are live on Twitch. Like I'm watching us right now. But yeah, so thanks for everyone for hanging out. And I'm going to upload this to YouTube. And you two guys stick around for a moment and we'll talk real quick off the air. And yeah, we'll see everyone next week.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Peace.